Okay, so this is a bit of an unusual situation because although I'm chairing the session, I'm also the next speaker. So I'm not going to read my bio. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about myself. So I'm Tasneem Abrahams. I'm an occupational therapist in mental health. I did have experience in spinal cord injury, neuro rehabilitation, etc. But I really found that I loved mental health the most. And when Prof spoke about the environment, I was smiling from ear to ear because OTs are one of the professions that, really take environment into big consideration. So how I ended up here, I'm the founder of Private Practice Growth Club because I've worked in government and non-profit sectors for most of my career. And when I decided to go into private practice, I noticed that there was not a lot of sense of community among private practice practitioners. And I often heard people say, why do I approach other health professionals in practice and they don't want to share their secrets? They don't want to, explain how to do things. And we're kind of struggling out here on our own. So I started the Private Practice Growth Club Facebook group, a small private group, and it grew and grew and grew. And I started to notice there was a need for this. But on the back end, besides being an OT, I also did courses in digital marketing. I used to write content for marketing websites, and I really love that side. So it's kind of like the opposite side of me. And so I took an interest in marketing and around the ethics, and being a health professional myself, the ethical side and the HPCSA rules and things like that really fascinated me as well. And so that's sort of the expertise I bring into Private Practice Growth Club, and then I partner with other experts like accountants and law experts to share the other expert areas. So that's why today I'm going to be speaking about social media. But today isn't really going to be as much about marketing as just social media in general. I will touch a little bit on some of the aspects you need to consider from a marketing point of view. Even if you are not in private practice, if you are a health professional, this applies to you. So I don't know if any of you are aware of the HPCSA ethics booklets. Can I get a show of hands? How many of you here have actually read those booklets? Okay, great. So there's quite a few of you. So everything you need to know is actually publicly available. If you go to the HPCSA website, and they've recently relaunched a new version which looks quite nice, and you go to the section where they talk about professional practice, there is a section on the website where you can download all of the booklets. The problem is they're not always very good with getting the word out when they update the booklets or change the booklets, so sometimes the booklet numbers changes. And so in 2019, the HPCSA, a bit late if you ask me, finally released a booklet 16, which is the booklet on social media. Okay, and it is a bit late because if you think that by 2019, social media was already in everybody's lives. But the booklet isn't about marketing, like I said. It is just about the use of social media as a medical professional. So that's why today's talk is really going to be about that. I'm going to skip over this and maybe get back to it later to just talk about where you can access more freely available information from the Private Practice Growth Club. But what we're going to cover today really is what is social media? Because I think there'll be some surprises as what platforms are actually considered social media that you don't think of as social media. What are the pros and cons of social media? And then what are the ethical considerations you need to take into account? So if we deconstruct the term social media, social, first of all, means the interaction between individuals and groups. It's how we relate to each other, right? Then we look at media is the channel of communication that we use to get information out there, news, messages, data. So social media is then the channel of communication and dissemination of content between individuals, groups, organizations, or society at large that promotes interaction, relationship building, engagement, and connection between the producers of content and the consumers of content. So I would bet that 100% of you here are avid consumers of content. Even if you don't have a single, what you think of as a social media app on your phone. But let's just get a quick poll out there. How many of you here have Facebook on your phones? Come be honest. Okay, how many of you have Instagram? How many of you have LinkedIn? Okay, how many of you here have, what's the other one? TikTok, the dancing one. TikTok, okay? Okay, how many of you here have WhatsApp? Every single one of you should put your hand up for that one. How many of you here have SMS? Every single one of you, right? Okay. So the HPCSA defines social media as the online tools and electronic platforms that people use to share information, opinions, photos, videos, and audio. So it's important to note there, it's the online tools and electronic platforms, which is basically everything that we use these days. Nobody writes a pen pal letter to anybody anymore, right? Hardly anymore do you have somebody, well, even a fax is an electronic method. So even if you're still faxing, I don't know who faxes these days. Even if you pick up the phone and phone somebody, that's still an electronic medium. Unless you're going to knock on your neighbor's door to say hello, you are using electronic medium to communicate with them. So this includes all social networks, so the ones that I just mentioned now. Twitter is now X, so I should actually update this slide. Any content sharing platforms, so YouTube is also a social media platform, even if it is asynchronous, where you are only consuming the content, it's still a social media platform. Personal and professional blogs, including email. So email is still an electronic media. It is still a social media platform. Electronic journals, even things published anonymously. Internet discussion forums, and the comment section of websites. That's a very important one because we've got a lot of Karens out there who like to keyboard warrior their way, in the comment section. But that is still a form of social media communication. So I actually messed up the slides because this should go further on because I wanted to talk about the pros. Okay? So there are some pros to social media, otherwise we wouldn't adopt them. Social media and by the definition, electronic forms of communication really gives us much faster access to information. So if you think about AI, for example, now it's even quicker. It's so much faster to get access to information, to synthesize information, to process information. Staying connected with family and friends. I mean, how many of you here have close family and friends who live in a different city or in a different country for that matter? Can I get an indication who has family that lives overseas, right? Social media has now made it possible for us to stay connected, whereas previously you had to write that letter and wait like months for it to come in the mail. The ability to communicate with large numbers of people in a short space of time. So on the slide about Private Practice Growth Club, one of the things I have a shot there of is my YouTube channel. My YouTube channel has now over 2,000 subscribers and over 100,000 watch hours, which means that just by me posting one video, I can communicate my message to over 2,000 people. So I wouldn't be able to do that normally without that platform. Opportunities for remote working. Now we have telehealth available to us. It means during COVID, that when we couldn't see our patients in person, we could still have access to them via these electronic platforms. Improves accessibility to education. So again, the example of the YouTube channel, you don't have to, there's so many, as a woman, there's so many comments I see in social media networks about women who say, I've taken time off to be with my children, to have babies. I can't get out to these CPD programs to stay compliant. But now with the electronic medium available to us, you can do courses online and you can still earn your CPD points. Improves ability to find employment to employees. Quite a few of you here put your hands up for LinkedIn. LinkedIn is an example of a great tool. I've had occupational therapists reach out to me because they're interested in my line of work and say, you know, can I send you my CV? This is something I'm interested in. They wouldn't have otherwise been able to do that. Can promote social change. I mean, we live in a wild world at the moment, and social media is one of the largest tools that is being used for advocacy, social justice work. Social change has been mostly driven through social media. And that's because it's linked to the fact that large populations can view the same message at the same time, and you have access to people you wouldn't necessarily have access to. It can be a channel to spread positivity. Yes, you get toxic positivity, but positivity in social media can be a lifeline for a lot of people. And then it can improve productivity. It's a double-edged sword because social media is a bit of a time suck, but if used correctly and using the correct tools, you can actually improve your productivity. And it gives businesses direct communication channel with potential customers. So if you have a Facebook page, people can message directly through that channel, and so they don't always have to phone you when you are busy with your clients, right? But there are also cons. The cons are that there are potential privacy and data breaches. Anything you put out there into this non-tangible world can also be taken out of that non-tangible world, right? There's a faster spread of false or incorrect information. Again, just like social change is a positive, there's the double-edged sword is that you also get this issue where larger populations are getting access to incorrect information, and it often drives the opposite of positive social change, right? Connecting with strangers more than family and friends, and in the mental health space, we've seen the research has indicated that people are more lonely today than they were in the days pre-social media, which is ironic because now you have more of a platform to connect with people, and yet people are more lonely. But it's because of this very reason. Because we look at our young people, I have teenagers, and it's constantly communicating with people that you have never met in person, but the very people that are sitting right next to you, you are not connecting with on a deeper level. It can lead to deterioration in in-person interpersonal skills for that same reason. As an occupational therapist, when we do a lot of play in our therapy, and a lot of social skills are taught through play, and that's through interacting with other children, picking up on body language. We're not getting that anymore if you're just texting the whole time. Chasing vanity metrics leads to connection only on a superficial level. So chasing those likes, people are doing strange things, putting themselves at risk even because they want the likes and the validation that they get from the superficial form of acceptance. Cybercrime is a huge one. Yesterday we had a talk with Suren, if any of you were here. He spoke about cybersecurity, links to privacy and data breaches, but that is a big thing. So many people, who here has gotten an inheritance from some uncle in some other country and said you must read out, right? That was a common one in email. Now they do other things. I actually had my Instagram, my private Instagram. I don't have it anymore, but I actually had it hacked at one point. It was so easy. I got it back, but it was just alerted me on how easy it is for somebody to actually get access to information. It can be a channel to spread negativity just as much as it can be a channel to spread positivity. I'm always alarmed when I follow like some inspirational people on Instagram, and they post something that's really vulnerable, and it's really a good message. And then when you look in the comments, you get all these unnecessary trolls, we call them trolls now, which can really impact negatively on the people reading the comments, but also the original poster. Then addictive and distractibility can lead to decreased productivity. So it's the opposite of increased productivity. I'm guilty of this myself, and all my clients, because I work with ADHD clients, all my clients struggle with this as well. It's like, you're supposed to go into the shower. Let me quickly check my email or my Instagram, and then an hour later I didn't go in the shower, right? We're all guilty of this. If you say you're not, I'm sure you are lying. Okay? Increased risk of cyberbullying, social anxiety, depression, and exposure to content that's not age appropriate. Again, speaking about our younger generation, is a real concern. FOMO, does anybody know what FOMO means? Do you all know? Okay. So fear of missing out and comparisonitis, I think, should be one of the ICD-10 diagnostic codes, comparisonitis. And then online versus reality can lead to unrealistic expectations. So you see this doctor on Instagram and they look like their practice is so successful and they got their makeup on and they look really great and life is great, and you think, why can't my practice grow like that? Like, why am I not as successful as that person? They only just started their practice the other day, and you have that unexpected expectation that you should also be, start your practice and tomorrow also have this beautiful office and all of these things, not knowing that behind the scene, the reality of that person is that they actually are in debt and they're struggling. They've got patients, but their cash flow means that they're not making ends meet and they're struggling in their home life. So that is a really dangerous thing. So when I actually was supposed to put this slide next, is that while there are the pros of social media, it's a great privilege that we have to be able to use that. With that power comes responsibility, because we are responsible for using social media effectively, which brings me to the ethical considerations. Now, I said at the beginning that the social media talk isn't really about marketing, because what might surprise you is that the HPCSA's rules is more about your use of it in your personal capacity than it is from a professional capacity. And the reason for that is that the role of the HPCSA is to protect the public and to protect the image of the professions. That's basically the role. And the way that they do that is to ensure that the way that health professionals behave doesn't reflect badly on the professions, that the public will trust the professions. And so we are held to a much higher account than the next person. Just the minute you graduate with your degree, you are already expected to be much more ethical, so to speak, than the next person, right? So here are some of the important ethical considerations you need to consider. One is patient confidentiality. Now, yes, absolutely, if you want to have personal social media accounts like Instagram, whatever, that is your prerogative. You may do so. I personally chose to actually delete all my social media accounts. I have social media accounts, but they are all professional accounts. And so I choose to only post along those lines. If you do choose to have a personal account, the preference is that it should be a private account and that you don't allow patients to follow you. But it's no rule that that is the case. If you do have a personal social media account and you do have patients that end up following you, because nowadays there are a lot of medical professionals who are kind of influencers, nothing wrong with that, but they just need to be aware. With patient confidentiality, if you have a patient that comments something and you respond in a way that can allude to some kind of procedure or doctor-patient relationship that is technically confidential, you could be breaking patient confidentiality without even realizing it. So you have to be extra careful in how you communicate. Then maintaining boundaries, similar thing. Now you have a patient who's following you on social media, and they see your family, they see your pets, they see you went on holiday. I actually saw a pediatrician on Instagram who I follow, really great, and she actually had somebody comment saying, "You're always so busy, I can't get an appointment, but here you are dancing on Instagram," right? And it looked really bad. And it's not that she has a right to, it doesn't maybe take her that long, she's maybe doing it in a break, but because that boundary was not there, that person sees this and sees, why can't I get an appointment with my sick child? Because you're busy dancing on Instagram, right? In conflicts of interest. Now, this is a big one, and I actually have a bugbear with this. I'm quite unpopular with my opinion on this, but we do need to be a little bit more robust in how we issue disclaimers. So in the aesthetic space, for example, you often get cases where practitioners are promoting certain aesthetic products. So they're not medical products necessarily, they're creams or whatever. You need to disclose what conflict of interest you have if you are being paid as a brand ambassador for that product. This is in any case a social media rule, even if you're not in the medical space, that was introduced not too long ago, that nowadays if you do a brand partnership, you have to make it very clear on your post that it's a sponsored post or that it's a brand partnership. So you can't, as a dermatologist or an aesthetics practitioner, be constantly promoting, you know, certain skin brands if you don't say that this is a brand partnership. You need to make it explicitly clear. In the same way that with conflicts of interest, I've also had a dietitian reach out to me privately saying, what is the rule here? Because I see there's this one particular dietitian who is constantly promoting this, I'm not going to say the product name, but a popular product for bulking and, you know, and whatever. And she was saying that sometimes he even promotes it for a certain population, which actually is counter, you shouldn't be promoting it for that population. It's actually unhealthy for them. But he's very clearly like an influencer, and he's clearly doing this as a brand sponsorship, and it's actually crossing unethical boundaries. So you have to say, and the example of the two profs here, they actually did it beautifully, where they actually said up front, as a disclaimer, they were paid to flew up here by the company that's, you know, hosting them. That was their disclaimer to say that they are saying there's a potential, you know, you need to know. Then the health profession's image. Now there's a big debate about this, and there's no hard and fast rule. There was not too long ago, there was a whole big hoo-ha internationally, because there was a movement of where, especially in Europe, they were complaining about medical professionals, particularly women, doctors, who on their social media accounts were in bikinis or on the beach, or like, you know, it's their personal accounts, right? And so there's not really consensus on that, but the movement around that was the women were saying we can be a medical professional and we can be a swimsuit model. We can be both, right? But so the question about professional image, it's a very subjective topic, because what I might feel is professional might not be what you feel is professional. I'll give you another example. There was on Anele on the club on 947 one morning, they had a discussion saying that her friend was driving with another friend, and she asked her to just quickly message her son's teacher to say she's going to be late. And when she messaged the child's teacher, she noticed the teacher's profile pic was of her downing a beer and having a cigarette in her hand. And so the discussion that Anele now put out to the radio is, do you think that it is unprofessional for a teacher to have that as a profile picture? And so you'll be surprised. You'll think, I see some of you shaking your heads because you think that, well, probably everybody would think so. But actually, when you went to the Facebook page, I'm always fascinated by what do people think. It was actually quite split. Some people were like, if that's her personal number, she has a right to have that. And other people were like, but if you are giving that number out to parents to communicate with you, then it's not. So it's not really a hard and fast rule, but you just need to consider, as an occupational therapist, the way I project myself to the public, and I say in my bio that I'm an occupational therapist, when somebody from the public views my profile, what image am I, by nature of representing my profession, casting onto my profession in the way that I act, the way that I dress, the way that I speak, my opinions, etc. Okay. I just want to give you an example on patient confidentiality and privacy. One of the things that's important to note, so the thing about consent isn't in the social media booklets, so the booklets kind of all speak to each other and they're all intertwined. And we know that in the normal professional booklets, it does talk about consent, right? And it's important that you can actually post pictures of patients on your social media, but you must obtain written consent. But I want to add that on top of that, you have to consider the dignity of the patient. So even if the patient gives consent, just make sure that you do it in a tasteful manner, right? That you don't, the person isn't going to look at it afterwards and then feel regretful that they allowed that. Another thing that's important to remember with consent is that consent can be revoked. So if you post something with consent of a patient and they tell you afterwards, I don't want it on there anymore, you have to take it off. Okay, so you can't ride a whole bunch of stuff on that this person is not going to take it off. So this is an example. This isn't in South Africa. This is an example of somebody posting a picture with their patient. But this is an example of an article that was actually, it's starting to come out in the media because, you know, the media love the tea, right? So they came out in the story of these surgeons that when they were doing organ transplants, they would have somebody recording and then they would hold it up and play. There's some game show in America where you must guess something, I don't know what, and they would say, oh, like guess how much this organ weighs, and then they would it's like a game to them, and that is even if you don't know who the patient is. It's the dignity of people who have gone through those procedures. And you're looking at shock at this picture, but people are doing this. If you just go onto social media, you'll see people are doing this. Okay? So some of the things to avoid is taking photos during surgery and other forms of care of treatment. And I know that people do this. And sometimes it can be quite educational, quite inspirational. So again, I'm saying you shouldn't not do it. It's preferable not to do it, and if you are going to do it, make sure the picture is tasteful. You also want to make sure when you are taking pictures in a surgery situation, make sure that you are absolutely sure there's no identifiable marks or in the picture that somebody can be identified. You might think, oh, I'm only showing the left toe, but that toe might have like a special birthmark or something on it, and this person can be identified by a loved one or etc. Right? So then it's the usual things like obviously nobody should be racist or sexist on their social media, but particularly as health professionals, because not only are we putting ourselves in a bad light, but also we represent our whole professions. Publicly sharing opinions, questioning the reputation of another professional. So we shouldn't be trolling each other. If you have an issue with another health professional, you should address it with him directly or report it to the HPCSA. That's what they are there for. Okay? And then making informal comments. So I've seen this before. I've seen the trend where you post like a post on Instagram, whatever, of a point of view, patient is what. And you kind of make fun of a group of patients who act in a certain way. Or not make fun, but kind of like just posting a life of, and like, we all know patients can be kind of sucky sometimes, right? So, but you can't now go and make fun of that group of patients, and that patient maybe follows you and knows that you're talking about them. Okay, so what are the benchmarks? Be aware of the image you present. Recognize that personal and professional can't always be separated. And engage with the public, but be cautious of giving personal advice. That's another thing. If you are on social media, and so as an ADHD coach, I often get questions as well. So I need to be careful that I don't give any like somebody will say, do you think maybe I have ADHD? I can't go and say, oh, I think you maybe have ADHD. I need to say, if you think you meet the criteria, these are the signs and symptoms, you need to go and see a medical professional. These are the types of people you can see. So avoid giving advice. The advice needs to always be generic and bespoke, and always with the disclaimer that they need to go and seek professional advice. Treat others with consideration and politeness and respect. Remember that other people may be watching you, and support your colleagues and intervene when necessary. So in this case, if you see someone that you know doing something that is questionable, then speak to them. And I've had people say to me, I've noticed this friend is doing so and so. How do I do this? We are afraid to have the difficult conversations, but you can do it in a nice way. So you could say, I saw that post, it was really cool, but I just attended this talk and they said this, and you must maybe look into that because I wouldn't want you to get into trouble. Then it's not like you should not be doing this, right? So help your colleagues. Not everybody knows these things. So again, disclaimers are very important. Health practitioners are advised to include disclaimers on social media profiles, indicating that your views are your own and that you should seek medical advice. So usually with Instagram, you can put a story up, and then you can add it as a highlight and then put that as your highlight on your stories. So people always see that. Or now Instagram allows you to pin posts, so you can make a disclaimer post and pin it to your profile so that they always see that. On your websites, anything. If you are sharing content or information about diagnosis, for example, or any of those things, you can always have the disclaimer afterwards that it is generic advice. Okay, so then what about marketing? I'm just going to go very briefly over that. Joey or somebody, can I get an indication? What is the time now? I don't know how long. 11:33. Okay. How am I for time? Okay. So what about marketing? Okay, how many of you here are private practitioners? Okay, quite a few of you. Okay. So there are 3 goals of social media marketing. One is brand awareness. So the more people know about you, so I don't have a website even, but people will message me and I ask, did you hear about me? And they say, oh, I saw you spoke at that event, or I saw you on Instagram, somebody mentioned you on Facebook. So even if somebody doesn't need your services, the more they become aware of you, the more likely if somebody needs your services, they're going to say, oh, and this is often the case with word of mouth. You have something that you need and you say, oh, you go into your WhatsApp group, does anybody know like a good pulmonologist, for example? And then people will say, oh, give names. And then if nobody knows anything, then they will go and look on Google. But you usually first ask the people you know. Then it's research-based. So if you I do something which I call social listening. So I join a lot of Facebook groups on ADHD, and then not to promote my services, purely to understand what is it that people are struggling with, what are the questions they are asking. And I actually make a note of it. I will copy the question and paste it in a repository so that I can understand what are people struggling with before they get to the point where they even consider going to a practitioner. So research-based, but then also research in terms of understanding not only what they need to find you, but also what are the symptoms that they don't necessarily tell you about when they're sitting in front of you. Because you know how it is, we all go to doctors ourselves. You go to the doctor and they ask you, tell me what your problems, your symptoms are, and then you for some reason, you can't remember everything at that time. So you go and you listen, you watch on social media, you understand. Then it's also driving sales. So we're not necessarily, I know we don't like to think of ourselves as selling, but that is what we're doing. When somebody books an appointment with us as a private practitioner, we are essentially selling our services. The driving sales doesn't have to mean like those annoying sales calls that says, oh, ma'am, I'm calling you from so-and-so and I want to sell you a data plan. No, that's not what selling is. Selling is just the act of getting someone to make a booking. So on social media, if you have buttons that talk about, make an appointment, inquire here, those are all sales tools that you can use through social media. So what does the HPCSA rule say about social media and advertising? I'm just going to move this side because I'm standing in the way. So it says that a practitioner shall be allowed to advertise all his services. So you are allowed to advertise. Some people have this weird belief that you're not allowed to advertise as a health professional. You are. But the caveat is that the advertisement must not be unprofessional, untruthful, deceptive, or misleading, or cause unwarranted anxiety. So you can't be telling somebody, you better go and get help because you might be dying tomorrow. Like you can't, I'm using an extreme example, but we've seen posts like that. So you have to just be careful. But again, the word unprofessional comes up. Who determines what unprofessional is? Because the booklets doesn't give clear-cut definition of that. So the only thing that the booklet says, in fact, the advertising section in the HPCSA booklet is literally 2 paragraphs. That says that you're allowed to advertise, and then it says, number 1, you may not canvass or tout or allow canvassing or touting, and then it goes on to give examples. That's it. That's the only thing they talk about with regards to advertising. And then when you ask them a question, because I email them all the time, they know my name already, I ask them questions all the time, and then they always say, oh, as per rule X, Y, and Z in that some other booklet, because you're supposed to read everything in combination, right? So what is it? I'm going to tell you now what touting is, because the example is also really stupid. Touting is when you draw attention by any means to offers, guarantees, or material benefits that don't fall in the categories of the services you're providing. And it's designed to entice the public to your practice. So you're enticing somebody to come to your practice. Now, this is the example that they've given. It's a stupid example. An example is advertising free services to patients. This is what the HPCSA could think of in all their creative juices. There are many other ways that we can tout people. If you are just simply listing that this is what is available, that isn't touting. What is touting is if you say on your website, if you come to my practice, we will give you a free foot massage while you wait. That is touting, right? Because you are asking. But if you're telling people there's parking, secure, all of this stuff, that's not touting. That's reassuring somebody that when they come to your practice that the car is going to be safe and they're going to still be you know what I mean? So this is an example, also not, I think it's some other country. Now this is also a topical one, which I sometimes get frowns upon, because we see this all the time. People are advertising percentage off, or they'll say, you know, book 5 sessions and get the 6th one free. You're actually not allowed to do that, because you are incentivizing potential overservicing. And overservicing is one of the things that is not allowed. Okay? Canvassing means conduct that draws attention to personal quality, superior knowledge, quality of service, professional guarantees, or best practice. Now with this, it really is just more about how you word things. Nobody's saying you can't say that you strive to provide best quality. Nobody's saying you can't say you use your professional expertise. But what you can't say is that I'm the best at this. I provide the most quality service. And you often see on like medical facilities and hospitals that they will say best in care, top whatever GP in the city. You can't say those things because you can't make those guarantees, and it is a subjective opinion. So here's an example, and although I didn't show who this is, we all know who this is. And this is a bit of a bugbear in the audiology. I don't know, are there any audiologists here? Yeah. So the audiology, for example, is an area that is shifting. Unfortunately, they are going kind of down the path of pharmacy. You know, back in the day, you had your corner pharmacist, independent. Now, the big retail are kind of taking over that space, and so a lot of pharmacists have had to close shop and go and work in pharmacies. Audiologists are facing that same danger right now, because we have these retail who are, you know, opening these chains, and now already this branch is not necessarily dealing with hearing has now entered the hearing space, and now you see they are offering audiologists the chance to work for them, but they basically make all the big bucks. Audiologists no longer have the autonomy. But what happens is that because they are not health professionals, they can be a PTY limited, they are like a holding utility company, they don't need to apply by the rules. They can still say buy one, get one off, all of those things. But here's the problem. So even here, where they talk about 50% discount when applied to the cost of a second hearing aid, that's all forms of touting, which is perfectly fine in normal retail. The problem is, if you are an audiologist working for this chain, the previous thing, it said that not or done for you, or on his or her behalf. So even if you are not the one doing this, by nature of you representing them, and in their adverts, I've seen their adverts where they show an audiologist and say, you know, you come for my services, whatever. But this is one of the people that I email all the time. So if you ever have questions, professionalpractice@hpcsa.co.za, or Mpo Mbodi is the professional practice portfolio. But I asked him, and he said that if you are affiliated with these franchises, you are still bound by the rules and remain accountable to council for any advertising done on your behalf. And it puts the audiologists in a real pickle, because they don't have control over a big chain at head office and their marketing team saying this is what we're going to do. So it's something that needs to be addressed with the HPCSA as well. This is an example of somebody who posted this, and I've just, didn't want to reveal who they are, but this is an example of pain-free can be considered a professional guarantee. So you shouldn't just say you're going to be pain-free. We can help you to achieve less pain. We can help you with your chronic pain. You can't just say you're going to have pain-free golden years. Right? You are allowed, this is a big question that often gets asked, is about pricing. Are you allowed to say your pricing. So you are allowed to make your pricing known. In fact, by the Competition Commission rules, you should make your pricing known. And in fact, by the HPCSA rules itself, you need informed financial consent. Patients need to be informed about what you are charging. So you need to give them a quote on that. So on your website, you can have your rates if you have set rates. The problem with this is that you can't go and say, save this, or you can't use it as a carrot. You can say we charge. And the HPCSA even goes so far and says you shouldn't say, you charge medical aid rates. But I don't think that is an issue. I think the issue is that you can't use it as a carrot that, come to me, I'm better because I'm cheaper. Because we're cheapening the profession, and that's what we don't know. So it again goes back to what is the image that you are projecting of the health professions. Listing the conditions you have a special interest in is allowed as well. So I can say I'm an adult ADHD occupational therapist, so that I don't have somebody who needs hand therapy coming to me, because that's not what I do, right? Okay, so that is the end. So do we have any questions? Either I covered it so well that you have no questions, or you're too shy to ask. I don't know which one it is. No question. Okay. So as I said, let me just go back to, if you want to follow my YouTube channel, so on there, I often share videos covering topics such as this, broad topics. I also interview experts. So like George from Gas Accounting was one of my experts who spoke about VAT, which is a big topic for our professionals. And I also interview a lot of practice owners who have, had some experience to talk about their journeys. It's a nice way to really hear what is the real journey, not the one that you see on the highlight reel on Instagram. So if you are ever looking for an answer to a question, chances are it probably is on the channel. And if it's not, you can always ask me. And then I have like a long list of topics that I need to cover at some point. But that is a great way to kind of find information. And then I am sharing a stand with Take Note events just down here if you need to speak to me. Okay, thank you so much, everyone.